As above, so below, as within, as without. Welcome to Wheel of Ezekiel Astrology Podcast, Episode 10. I am your host, Ezekiel La Rosa, and I'm joined here today by Astrologer Fiona Aedgar. Today we're going to discuss the upcoming Virgo Lunar Eclipse taking place tomorrow, March 14th. And to begin with, uh, well, first and foremost, Fiona, welcome.
Thangoing
Glad to
to be
have you
back
back.
again.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Always good to have you here, explain these things to people. We're going to start, I think, from maybe more of a beginner's mindset, because this podcast is geared mostly to beginners that may not be familiar with well, I guess, more basic concepts in astrology. So I guess to begin, it would be good to explain what is actually an eclipse, what
So,
actually creates it.
in astronomy, an eclipse is when one planet or body moves into the shadow of another body.
Mhm.
And in astrology, an eclipse is either a kind of big ending when it's a lunar eclipse, and then there's a new beginning on steroids when we have a solar eclipse.
Right. Okay. So,
There's And of course, it's going to affect all of the different signs in particular life areas.
mhm.
And there is a sense of candy coating with eclipses because traditionally speaking, they were always seen as something,
Mhm.
the king's
I,
going to die.
I've noticed that the more ancient interpretations about eclipses definitely had a darker tone to them, whereas modern astrology, particularly the New Age, that again likes to candy coat and essentially water everything down, has turned it into something that's, more akin to
Garbage.
just, yeah, well, just not, yeah, well, I wouldn't recommend it for people beginning. It'll just confuse you and it's not accurate to begin with. So why would you want to follow something that's not accurate? People are just trying to soothe things over when that's not reality. So the whole point of an eclipse and an omen is to serve as a warning, not to something to just be ignored and to kind of, you know, not be taken seriously. So it's not also to assume the worst because eclipses don't affect people the same. In this case,
Mhm.
the mutable axes are going to be the most affected. So that would be firstly Virgo, and then of course the polarity there on that is Pisces, and then also Gemini and Sagittarius that would be getting the square in this case. So let's see. Maybe to begin, we could say the lunar nodes are the demarcators of where an eclipse is going to fall because every year they don't fall in the same signs. That usually takes about 18 months for the nodes to work their way backwards through
Mhm.
a zodiac sign. And that's another distinguishing thing about the nodes. They're always going against the grain of the other movements of the planets. So
Yeah.
they'll always enter 29 degrees of a sign and work their way through all the way to zero and then 29 degrees of the next sign. So just to understand that movement happening there with the nodes. So the North Node in which is right now in Pisces, in Vedic astrology, just to give it another name, because it's referred to also as the head of the dragon, it's called Rahu, and he's considered an insatiable beast, some say demon, dragon,
Mm.
that is constantly, starving and trying to satiate itself with anything. I mean, it's really been chasing the sun and the moon, trying to devour them, and that's essentially what happens on an eclipse. My understanding is they essentially, metaphorically speaking, it devours and eclipses the sun or moon, which is why they appear to go dark for a few moments. And so, yeah, of course, with all this, astrologers are reading into this in a more metaphorical way that usually has more of an internal interpretation, versus astronomers are much more literal, materialist, and they don't necessarily see any spiritual or well, any spiritual connotations to it whatsoever. So that's another distinction to make between the astronomical interpretation of eclipses versus the astrological interpretation. So in this case, because it's taking place in Virgo, the South Node, which is always 180 degrees away from wherever the North Node is, the South Node, which is referred to as K2, which is the tail of the dragon, is in Virgo, and it's going to be happening at 23 degrees. So 23 degrees Pisces and Virgo are where the nodes are currently. So when the sun and moon meet for either a full moon or new moon, near these points, which aren't actually physical points, they're actually the intersection of the orbits of the sun and moon. So whenever they reach that point, this phenomenon known as the eclipses happens. So do you want to explain the difference between what an eclipse is, what a solar eclipse is versus a lunar eclipse, Fiona?
Sure. Lunar eclipse is very much like a full moon in that it's the ending or the completion of something.
Mhm.
And the solar eclipse is very much like a new moon on steroids, and it will obviously create something new. I mean, that's it in a nutshell.
Yes. Right. So when they come between so basically the solar eclipse is when the moon, because it's conjunct to the sun, it's a new moon, is between the Earth and the sun. So to us on Earth, from our geocentric perspective, the sun appears to be blotted out for a moment.
Hmm.
Versus a lunar eclipse, it's the sun that gets between the Earth and the moon. And then from our perspective on Earth, it appears that the moon is blotted out.
Hmm.
So that's another distinction to note there. Obviously, if you can visualize, the on a chart, if I actually have it, actually, if I can share my screen here, I'm actually going to pull up the chart for this eclipse here so we can analyze it a little bit more detailed here. Okay, let's see. All right. Can you see that well?
I can. Yeah.
All right, very good. So here we go. Like I was saying, the moon will be at 23 degrees Virgo, and here, this little glyph right here is representative of the south node, which is K2. Right across from it, 180 degrees, we have the sun at 23 degrees Pisces with the north node at 27 degrees, right? So anyway, and also noting here that Saturn is still in a conjunction with the sun. Well, it happened yesterday, it was exact, and now it's separating, but it still will be applying, well, not applying, but it'll still be in effect. It's a separating aspect, not applying aspect.
Hmm.
Applying is when two planets are about to complete an aspect, but in this case they're separating, but nonetheless, still that effect will be there influencing. And then Jupiter here, I'm noting from Gemini, is also going to be making a loose square, which is also to note. But I would read that as more positive because even though it's a square, it is Jupiter, which is a benefic. What's your take on that? My understanding is that's actually not necessarily a bad thing. Um,
Yeah, I think the square with Jupiter, I mean, it might create some drama or something, but
sure, depends on what you.
um, it's worth noting that this conjunction between the Sun and Saturn is going to influence like the next several months that this eclipse is going to kind of live for,
Sure.
because the energy of an eclipse is much longer lasting than
Yeah,
like
about
a regular full moon. It's going
right.
to be a few months. It can even be like forever. That's what I always say because if you get pregnant or if you have a divorce or
Okay, right. It
anything
can
like that, it
right. It
can.
can have very very long effects, but usually it's a 6 month period for most things that can come and go, unless of course it's an absolutely life-changing event that would changes things that in a way that they'll never be the same again. That's of course
Yeah.
relevant to a chart and a particular configuration, which it's nothing to be concerned about because oftentimes a lot of this change can actually be very good. It can be something that catalyzes you to the next level in life, essentially initiates you, ends the process that was keeping you from growth because you
Hmm.
essentially maybe you completed something in terms of I don't know, something very difficult you were working through. Now it's come to an end, and now you're able to release
Yeah.
that and move forward. Be it a relationship, be it some kind of situation, a work situation, or just being I don't know. We'll go through. We're gonna eventually go through later on in the podcast each of the signs to see where this falls. Maybe has to do with releasing debt and being rid of that, and that liberates you for to be able to move forward in life. Maybe of course, having children if it's like a fifth house issue, or not issue
Yeah.
situation. Sorry,
Big
of
life,
course.
big life events or
Yep.
eclipse events. So we always have eclipse seasons.
Hmm.
So, I mean, do you remember? I think it was last year. There was a was it a solar or lunar eclipse in, yeah, it was in Aries, I think.
Yep. Yeah,
And
no,
there was so much fear and drama over it, and everyone was thinking, it's the end of the world. It was even in all of the like tabloids. Nothing happened.
that's the thing. There is actually oftentimes a lot of hype about it in that way, which maybe is the other extreme from candy coating saying, "Oh, it's nothing," to that it's the apocalypse or so. I remember that one. Actually, that one had a more positive effect on me as opposed to the Libra eclipse that had happened the previous October, which had been right on my sun to the degree,
Oh.
which was so. This was actually the ending of that and liberating me from the situation that for other eclipse the Libra eclipse had put me in essentially a situation. So I was actually able to move away from the place I was living that I did not like, and I was able to move out to where I am now and essentially kind of start my life again, and then eventually get to a place where I could do a podcast and
Hmm.
a lot of things. It was internal for me because in my case, if it happens near anyone's moon, like in my case, I'm an Aries moon, so this one it wasn't to the degree because I have my moon a little bit further in degrees, but it was within probably a 10-degree orb of my moon, so it's still pretty fairly close.
Hmm.
Um, so there was a bit of release or increase too. I mean, happening for myself, in a house that has to do with travel as well, the ninth house. So, and that's what I did. Literally, I started making plans and figuring out where I wanted to go and how I was going to do it. And within about a month or so, I bought a plane ticket and I was ready to head out. So, it can happen very quickly sometimes, the effects of it.
Yeah.
Which then, here almost a year later, I'm still kind of, at the tail end of that. So I'm actually very interested in what this is going to be signified because where this Aries one we're talking about this coming up, it's the closure of that cycle. Whereas this Virgo eclipse that's happening tomorrow is the beginning of a new one that's happening on the new
Hmm.
axis, the Pisces Virgo axis. Whereas the Libra one already ended, and now Aries is the last one of that one. The last Libra one was in October, on October 2nd, and so now we're getting the last Aries.
The
So
other
anyway,
the other thing is that the visibility of the eclipse, the length of how many hours that this eclipse is actually visible for.
right, and where it's
If
visible
you
from too.
Yeah, but if you put that into months, that's how long the effects are going to last for.
Oh yes, I have heard that. That yeah,
So
exactly.
this
Yeah,
one is going to be about 3 months.
okay, so I guess yeah, maybe a little bit shorter for this one. And the
Yeah.
country from wherever you're able to see it from, whatever territory you're able to view it from, wherever it passes over, is usually an indicator of where it's going to be felt the most.
Yeah, and in this case, it's
It's
the Americas.
I
It's
know, like in 2017 with the Great American Eclipse. Like I was in Oregon to
yeah.
view that, and actually I saw that eclipse like firsthand, like as clear as you could see it. It was absolutely shocking.
Wow.
Dropped me to my
Yeah.
knees. I was so startled and stunned
Whoa.
and amazed at what I was beholding. Yeah, I was at a festival too, so I guess the ambience was also really conducive to that. But
Oh,
not get into that. But yeah, that was transformative for me, and of course, America in 2017. I mean, that was the beginning of essentially getting us to where we are now. So,
yes. Yeah.
but all that to say, so yeah, it's fascinating to track back a little bit in terms of what previous eclipses represented and seeing the effects of it, because really that's the only way to really study these things and see them. The same with transits of planets, looking back at
Yeah,
history and kind of the parallels between them to kind of tease out what the possibilities of that could be.
exactly.
But so for
Exactly.
the
You have to be a bit of a historian to be an astrologer because it's about
mhm.
compiling the data and
Yeah,
comparing. So you have to be interested in history to be a good astrologer.
oh yeah, agreed. Yeah, and well, but it's another unique take on history. My interest in history, I had an interest in history since I was young, but it's been definitely renewed and from a very different lens and
Yeah,
perspective now.
me too.
Even watching the news, I don't really care to watch the news, like necessarily get wrapped up in it, and I only do for short bits. I mainly do just to kind of get what the astrology is pointing out, and information is,
Yeah.
fascinating. You see a story and you immediately can correlate it to something that's going on in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, it helps for writing, so you can actually have a gauge on the world and in terms of being able to make predictions and all that. Because astrologers should be informed. I feel they shouldn't be ignorant of what's going on in the world.
Exactly.
You can't bury your head in the sand. It's not to get caught up in it, and certainly don't put too much emotional investment in it. I mean, there's something much higher that's guiding all of this. So
Yeah, and the other
no
thing
reason
is
to
that,
fear.
yeah, we
Go ahead.
shouldn't let our own beliefs influence astrology. As astrologers, we have to remain somewhat impartial
Hmm.
because that's why there was. a lot of astrologers supposedly predicted that Kamala Harris was going to win that election. And it was because they were letting their desires,
Yeah, they
in.
could maybe behold the possibility of Trump winning, perhaps. I don't know. I'm biased. For me, you look at the symbols, and that's what you have to go with. But as they say, an artist will always put something of himself or herself into their work. In a
Yeah.
way, maybe in astrology, there's a way that there is that bias that sneaks in there. But yeah, try to be as objective as possible. I feel certainly.
Yeah, it's
Um,
hard. I get it, but we have to
mhm.
try.
Sure, sure. So anyway, moving on to the significations of this particular Virgo eclipse. Now that we've kind of laid out the basic signification of eclipses and kind of talked about previous eclipses and then the upcoming one in Aries, to just kind of zoom in and hone in on the Virgo 23-degree eclipse.
Hmm.
Maybe before we go into an individual horoscope of signs, Fiona, what do you foresee kind of on the global stage, the more mundane astrology interpretation of the Virgo eclipse?
It's
Um,
the interesting fixed stars for me that are conjunct the moon on this eclipse.
okay,
So the first one is Cor Caroli,
okay.
and it's said to be particularly connected with heads of state. So
Hmm.
people that are in power, in particular men, I think.
Hmm.
Now, the other one is Alkes, which I actually really like. I like the star, and it's about prophecies and psychic abilities. So, on a personal level, it's a really good time to do divination or meditate or scrying or something. But on the world stage, are we going to see a prophecy play out or something? I don't know.
Yeah, it's that first star you mentioned, is it more of a benefic star or a malefic star having to do with leaders or does it just indicate leaders?
The thing with the first star is that it was kind of it was the star obviously wasn't created then, but that constellation was created in 1690. It's one of the modern ones.
Okay, right.
It's mostly positive, going
Okay.
by the very limited data that we have.
Sure, sure.
But the
It's yeah,
second one is quite positive, I would say.
okay. So I mean, I was what came to mind with that having to do with heads of state is just also taking note that the Saturn Sun conjunction is still separating. I read that in two ways. I mean, because the sun, of course, represents authority figures. So, the main leading authority figures right now are going to be on the spotlight. And I feel this is certainly going to, the effects of this are going to be visible there. I think that's what that's indicating. Saturn, either, in a sense, humbling is something I recently wrote about, kind of when I was just meditating on what this signified. I wrote an article yesterday about this, a brief note. Um, it has that way of Saturn kind of keeping the sun in its shadow over egoic state in check a little
Hmm.
bit,
Hmm.
kind of bringing it back down to earth and showing it its limitations, and
Yeah.
vice versa. Also, the sun illuminating the Saturnian ignorance that's the dimness, which is kind of the ignorance of like what you didn't see before. Now the sun comes to illuminate that as much as also because it's the end of the synodic cycle. Saturn has done a full cycle around and now is conjoining the sun. This happens with all planets when they conjoin the sun and then they emerge again. They're starting another cycle. Their connection, the conjunction with the sun could be looked at as the reset point. That when planets come back to the sun, they get this fire ritual, Kazemi, and then that kind of they can burst through forward again and begin a new cycle, re-energized, purified, so to speak. So Saturn has this purification. So maybe like the solar figure. Um, well, it could also be Saturn in a way. It's a mix of both. I think different leaders could have both a Saturnian and solar signification on the world
Hmm.
stage. There being some kind of rebirth, some restructuring, maybe new mandates coming out of a Saturnian nature, which could
Yeah.
be positive or negative. I mean, probably more negative in a way. I mean, this eclipse has to do with decrease, so it's probably the tearing down and taking away of something. It's a decrease essentially, is what I'm seeing here. Um, being that it's in Virgo does have to do with health. It could have something to do with something health related globally,
It could.
perhaps. It
Yeah. I
could
mean,
have,
there's like bird flu. There's a lot of talk about that at the moment.
unfortunately, and well, Virgo having to do with the harvest too, so it is connected to food and food supply. So that's another kind of concerning thing that potentially,
Oh,
has to do with
farming.
bread, yeah, farming production,
Yeah.
something happening with that there's a decrease. I mean, already when I go to the grocery store here, oftentimes there aren't eggs, at all in the section, and there's
Wow.
sometimes shelves that don't have any,
And then we just so happen to
or,
have bird flu, so people are scared to get their own
well,
flocks of
that's
hens.
to me. I mean, a lot of people panic about that, and they think, or I don't know. Well, for myself, I don't see that as a coincidence. That's
No.
totally something that's been orchestrated. I
Hmm.
mean, all of a sudden, there's not just this bird flu, and all of a sudden, anytime there's a crisis that kind of comes on like that, you need to really just step back and see there's no coincidence of these things. These things are, or fires or any of these
Yeah.
catastrophes. That's not how the
Yeah.
world works. Really, there always is some cause to this effect that we're seeing here. It's no coincidence.
Yeah.
Whether there is or isn't an actual flu, an actual infection with birds, I don't know. I mean, that's possible. I'm not denying that that's a possibility there. Um, it's not something that just happened. I mean, I think it's something that was directly perpetuated, whatever they're injecting the birds with, which is another reason to be cautious about what you eat.
Yeah.
Uh,
Also the
though
cats. It seems,
that's I heard that too recently that it's apparently spread over to cats. What have you
yeah.
heard about that?
There was a bunch of big cats that died in the States, and there were a
Oh, okay.
couple of cats that were being fed a raw diet, which I actually used to feed my own cats a raw diet, but I've stopped.
Mm,
I'm cooking it now just because of this.
hmm
Because, well, you look back in, with history again and look at the witch trials and all of that, they nearly wiped out the population of cats in Europe because cats are psychic. They
hmm
they fight off evil spirits, they absolutely do.
hmm
So I don't know. I wouldn't put it past them to do something to hurt the cat population.
mm. Well, Virgo, it's associated with the sixth house that does have to do with pets. So
Yeah.
that's one loose way to look at it. I mean, on a personal level, that would be more Aries risings having issues with their pets. But on a global scale, there was some, like, I don't know, some mandate of having to do with pets. I mean, goodness, hopefully not. Um,
Yeah.
that's not, well, I'm not predicting anything too uh, horrific like that. I would hope
No.
not. But anyway, just maybe we could just go into each of the signs now, in terms of
Yeah.
what, because I think we don't want to do too much of an overkill here. Oh yeah, one last thing actually, I just saw in my notes here, in terms of where the eclipse is falling in terms of the decans. This is the third decan
Mm-hmm.
of Virgo that this eclipse is taking place in. So the Chaldean order of descent attributes Mercury as the ruler of this decan, which Mercury also rules and is exalted in Virgo. So it's a very Mercury ruled section. I mean, this whole eclipse really is. I mean, Mercury is also about to station retrograde. So Mercury, I'd say, of all of the characters, of all the planets, of all the gods, it's the most involved in this one by rulership and by its motion here. Uh, so the third decan is also ruled by the Ten of Pentacles in the Minor Arcana, which is the Lord of Wealth. So it does have to do with money, it has to do with assets and resources and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so
And again, health.
yes, yeah, materiality, yeah, the body, exactly. So again, being that it's decrease, there's maybe kind of a more of a negative connotation with this. In some cases, for some people, it may be a positive thing. As
Mm-hmm.
we'll go through each of the signs now and see how, ridding yourself of something is actually a very positive thing. So it's not just that South Node bad, North Node good. That's a very simplistic and not at
Yeah.
all accurate way of looking at it. So the South Node can be very liberating. So let's see.
Yeah, it is
Oh,
liberating, especially in terms of karma.
hmm Well,
Because,
right, working through karma and releasing it,
yeah.
but
So,
okay.
for example, for Aries rising and the eclipse happening in their sixth house, it could indicate an ending of a period where they had bad health.
hmm
There could be a flare up, but then a conclusion to that. So it's
hmm
not necessarily bad at all. I mean, it's like
Right,
I
right.
always say, just because the global stuff is bad, it doesn't mean that your life has to be bad. I mean, look at our ancestors. They went through everything, but they also had children, got married, fell in love, you know.
Yes, that's definitely. it's a very nuanced thing. I mean, looking also what other transits are taking place, what other placements and Aries rising may be having in Virgo, like a moon or I don't know, any other planets or aspects. I would also put the workplace and day-to-day routine as another area of life that's going to be affected and felt. That's what's indicated here, as well as pets. It's
Yeah.
another thing, usually small pets, but just pets in general. Um, so coworkers, subordinates as well. Just the way you go about your day will probably change in some level. You may just release doing certain activities, things you used to do. Maybe you'll find they're a waste of time, or they don't really serve you anymore, or just no reason to do it. It's just maybe reanalyzing that. Um, Mercury retrograde also in Aries in the first house is also about to signify different changes in terms of how one maybe sees oneself and how one communicates, and some observations of self maybe that will tie into this too, and things you're ready to let go of. With
Yeah.
Venus there as well. Um, though I'm not necessarily wanting to get too much into the rest of the astrology because there's a lot going on in the sky, but I mostly want to focus on these just the eclipse. So this in this case for
Hmm.
Aries is the sixth house. All right, well, let's see. Let's do Taurus next. For myself, I have it's happening in the fifth house, so I have as themes children, creative pursuits, dating, fun activities. In which case, some of those fun activities could be considered maybe a waste of time, and maybe something also that one is ready to release. What are your thoughts on Taurus risings, Fiona?
Yeah. It can be maybe a time when they start to review like the stuff that they do for fun.
Hmm.
They get in touch more with their creative side because Taurus isn't really, I mean, of course, Taurus people can be creative, but they're more like down to earth and, structured. So maybe it's a time when they discover something, fun that they really like to do or that they're good at creatively.
Yeah, that's true, right? Or letting go of doing an activity so that then you can find something else that you like.
Yeah.
Like it's almost like a new hobby comes into your life because you make room for it, basically, because
Mm-hmm.
you release something else. Um, Maybe for, I mean, this is just another example. Maybe for older people that are having children moving out of the house, maybe that kind of new space and kind of not having the responsibility anymore with their children kind of opens up their life in another way to pursue other activities they didn't have time for before, and so
Exactly.
that recreational area, um, and yeah, and of course then health always,
And and
new
sometimes
diets, exercise, that kind of thing.
sometimes when you have an eclipse either in your fifth house or your seventh house, it can bring an ending to a lengthy period of being single
Mm-hmm.
because
Yep.
it's an ending of your previous experiences of that house. If you're single, you could
Sure.
meet someone.
Yeah. And then Venus being retrograde, though it's not in that house, oftentimes can mean the ending of a relationship that then opens up again space for another one. I mean, a lot of the themes, the thematic theme I'm seeing now is a lot of endings and new beginnings by
Hmm.
multiple indications in the astrology right now. So definitely the Venus and Mercury retrogrades are indicating a review period, which can mean endings, and then the South Node eclipse now also endings. But it's not just death or endings; it's endings so that new beginnings can take place. So there's
Yeah,
always the universe hates a void, so there's always going to be something new put in place. So you're not going to be left empty in any way.
exactly.
It's up to you to act on it, and essentially that's what this serves as indicators. It's not just going to magically happen. You have to do something with this. These indicators are serving as to what things are essentially being how the scene is being set, the stage is being set, and you have these assets, you have these tools to work with to know what area of life it's best to focus on right now, and how to facilitate these things to manifest into your life. But you have to take action for that to be
Exactly.
a reality. Right.
We have
Very
to
good.
embrace changes instead of fearing them and trying to avoid them because human beings are supposed to be like the cycle of the seasons. We're
Hmm.
always changing. Some parts are dying, then there's a rebirth. We're supposed
Hmm.
to be on this wheel, but we cling on to this one place, kicking and screaming. I don't want to change. Well, when an eclipse happens, you might have to.
Hmm. Yep. Very good. Right. So should we do Gemini?
Yeah.
Gemini rising. It's in the fourth house.
Hmm.
So themes I have are, well, the home, family, ancestry, memory, the past, and the private life. There's some
Yeah.
basic themes there.
Well, I've got
Anything?
Gemini rising, and
Right.
I just moved recently, like to another house in Denmark. It's a long story, but I see
Oh,
this
okay.
eclipse for me personally as it's kind of solidifying or making more concrete my new home.
Hmm.
That's the way that I see it anyway, because I'm really happy here in this new place. And it's like an ending of a bunch of like madness where I moved and moved countries first, moved to a house in Denmark and then moved again. So
Hmm.
it's bringing an ending to that cycle for me.
I see. No, very good. I'm happy to hear that. I know what that's like to constantly be moving. So it's definitely, yeah, it's a very nice feeling to finally feel settled and to have all
Hmm.
that stress kind of be able to release the stress essentially of having to deal with all the logistics of that. But very good. But yeah, in terms of family life, ancestry, I mean, what we mean by family, because I mean, some people don't necessarily feel like they have family. That could also mean just people that are close to you, your closest people in
Hmm.
life. Because the fourth house, another reading I see of it is also it's kind of like it's like the innermost part of you. Because from the fourth house, it's the middle house between the ascendant point and the descendant point, right there at the IC. So it's the subterranean. It's the nadir, if you will. So it's a very private area. It very much has to do with the innermost parts of oneself, the emotions. Oftentimes, because it is signified by Cancer being ruling it in the natural zodiac.
Hmm.
And so then that Buddha put the moon there as the ruler, which then though it doesn't necessarily rule the fourth house. But in this case, there's a lot of significations that are very parallel that you can read into what the fourth house means on some level.
It's quite a
So
pa
ancestors, go
Sorry,
ahead.
it's quite a powerful place for Gemini risings because it's angular.
Hmm.
It's an
That's right.
angular house, so who knows what's going to happen? Hopefully
Sure.
nothing too dramatic, but it also does make a square to Gemini, so there might be a bit of friction regarding something.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think everyone's going to experience some level of friction just because of the global changes that are going to be taking place. I mean, and it just eclipses always have some. There's always some kind of shakeup with it, and of course, then all the other astrological changes with new planets moving into well, with planets moving into new signs. That's also going to be this is kind of a prelude to that too. So, but yeah, nothing to fear. Um,
No.
shall we do? Okay, we just did Gemini. Okay, let's see. Cancer then. Cancer rising. It's happening in the third house for Cancer risings. So this has to do with the more general environment, which you could say is your neighborhoods, and also neighbors, of course, the people that live around you, siblings or peers, so classmates if you're going to school, short trips, short commutes, communication, and transportation. Basic themes for the third house. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I think you covered it there. But it does make a good it makes a sextile to Cancer. So
Mm-hmm.
overall it should be pretty good for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Though the ruler of this house, being the moon, which is being eclipsed, I feel always on eclipses, Leo and Cancer are always going to have some kind of effect because it's the luminary that rules that specific sign. That's going to, on some level, even if it's not super tied in personally to an individual chart, just because the moon is being eclipsed for a bit, I feel that maybe whether Cancer suns, moons, risings will all feel that wherever you have a lot of Cancer
Yeah.
energy. So
I
I
have
mean,
a
yourself in this case, yeah.
Yeah, I've got Cancer Sun and I have been feeling a bit wacky today, a
Mm,
bit spaced out.
hmm. Right.
And I was actually ill yesterday. So
Oh,
I feel
good.
fine now. I don't know what happened. But yeah,
Yeah.
Cancers feel everything about the moon intensely.
Yeah, absolutely. They're very intuitive. And it has to do with water, so holding a lot of water maybe in your body, also a lot of emotion. So maybe it's a good time to also release that, release a lot of
Hmm.
emotions you can work through. Of course, I think most any South Node eclipse is a good time to release something. But in this case, because Cancer is so intimately tied to the emotions, it's an opportunity for that for Cancer risings particularly.
Yeah.
Right. All right. Next we have Leo. Leo rising. Okay, I can speak for myself on this one. It's taking place in the second house, which is considered the money house, right? So assets, resources. I put also support because it's the second house always supports the first house. So it's, things that are supporting the native, which money is one of those things, but other resources, even food and people, even people that are of support. Um, and then material possessions, right, that come and go. Um, I see this because it's a south node. It is definitely a decrease. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be a lot of loss of money, but it's just an indicator that a lot more money has been going out than has been coming in, which I can
Hmm.
attest to. So it's getting kind of a slow period with finances, with money coming in. But that I'm reading that in this case is even for myself with changes I'm foreseeing already about to immediately take place is that period, that dry period kind of ending, and then releasing that period of spending more than you're getting, and then or taking in, and more money beginning to come in, or resources in another way, not necessarily money, because it can be resources coming via many different routes. But I see that kind of as an end of that period for Leo risings. In the sense
Hmm.
that, I mean, unless you have some configuration in your chart and you make some rash decision, that could indicate very big losses. But I wouldn't read that immediately generically as that. So, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Well, K2 is going to be in Virgo for a while, so
Hmm.
it's going to be transiting the second house
Hmm.
of Leo's chart
Hmm.
like for a while, but it's a really good time to have a better relationship with money, to become more Virgo-like with your finances. It
Hmm.
is K2 does release, but it also teaches us a lot of lessons.
Sure, become a better steward with your money, to be a little more
Yeah.
frugal with it. Maybe it's also just Leo's generosity, because Leo does have this generous heart that wants to give a lot more than sometimes
Hmm.
maybe it should. So maybe to reanalyze that and take into
Yeah,
account like how much you're giving and to who. Uh,
exactly.
in regards to that, just to be a little more cautious with that, and what you're investing in,
Yeah.
if it's really worth it or not.
That's
Um,
right, because they're very generous that way, but
mhm.
not everyone, is the same.
Yeah,
So
right, right, very good. Yeah, not everyone necessarily deserves it, or maybe it's just not something that's worthwhile to invest in anymore. So it really just will depend for each person, each Leo rising for themselves to take that into account. Look at the rest of the transits in the chart too, and come to a good conclusion there. But I think everyone's going into some kind of rethinking some area of their life. So in this case, it's just Leo is just with money and resources, and maybe with just the people that you choose in your having your life that support you, that maybe they're not supporting you in the ways you want to be supported. So maybe it doesn't purely have to do with just money. It could just be that your support system, it needs to be revised in itself, like who
yeah.
you trust. Um, because the second house also kind of has to do with your values in some way, with what things you
Hmm.
put value in. So what are you placing value in, and what people you're placing value in, and what possessions, what types of things, that you put your energy towards. So
Exactly.
it's that as well. All right, I think that's great for Leo. So now we're coming to essentially the the spotlight, which is
Yeah, Virgo.
Virgo risings taking place in your first house, of course, having to do with the self, so appearance, how you show yourself to the world,
Hmm.
uh, your health, your vitality, so your energy, your perception of self and world. I think was definitely going to be something that comes up in all of this. So self-esteem is one of those things, and also
Yeah.
your outlook on the world. So whether you become more pessimistic or more optimistic, and then it's kind of a shedding, a purging of identity, or maybe an old identity, or just a shedding or purging of something having to do with yourself, with with
Mm.
with your identity on some level, um, or a release of some sort. Anything you
Yeah.
want to add to that?
Well, I mean, because this is the first house for Virgo, the first house is connected to new beginnings, the spring equinox, when everything comes to life.
Hmm.
So some Virgo risings may be about to experience a really big dramatic change in their lives.
Yes,
And also for Virgo, the North Node or Rahu is transiting the seventh house.
yes.
So there could be a big shakeup or change connected to your relationship status, whatever that is.
Yeah, which I think well, yeah, yeah, that's true. Other factors of Venus retrograde will probably tie into this on some level. So what I'm saying is the effects of that might not actually come into to fruition until after Venus retrograde is over, perhaps. Maybe it's a
Yeah.
reconsideration or a testing of a potential relationship that won't necessarily be solidified because I wouldn't recommend anyone starting a serious relationship under Venus retrograde. Maybe get to know someone and kind of, communicate and kind of test the water if it's maybe a good fit, but maybe before you actually commit and choose to get really deeply involved, wait for Venus to move direct, maybe even clear its shadow and get back to 10 Aries, and then
Yeah.
maybe see. I mean, I wouldn't move in with a person at that before then. I mean, it's likely
No.
to definitely
Don't get
go terribly
married.
wrong, get reversed. Yeah, and Mercury's helping to revise and to really analyze this whole process too, of having to do relationships or I mean, the seventh house is other things too. It can have to do with legal matters as well on some,
Hmm.
so even like courts, business partnerships as well. So not just romantic ones, just if you're wanting to start a business with a person, maybe it's another time to kind of test that as well. And maybe
Yeah.
go over certain information that, to see if it's a good fit, if even launching this venture with this person is actually a good idea or not. There's a lot of time. It's a time to consider. So I think definitely what you're saying, Virgo's about to make a big leap in life. So it's a good time to kind of step back and consider these things, release the things that are blocking or in some way just not helping, maybe kind of just cluttering because Virgo likes to be neat and tidy. So it's a good time to neat and tidy up the clutter around you so that you can
Hmm.
then move forward. So I
Yeah.
think it's definitely time for a good spring cleaning
Shed a
in that way.
skin.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
And yeah, sure, why not do a makeup or redo? But after Venus is goes direct. So so don't
Yeah.
don't don't go doing that yet. But yeah, consider it. Consider a lot of things. Definitely anything should and everything should be put on the table for analysis because that's what Virgo likes to do. Look at all the
Yes.
fine details of things. But just take time to act. Don't feel rushed. Just
Yes, but
take it
don't
slow.
take too much time because Virgos will also do that. They will analyze something
To death.
for
Yeah, okay, right.
years and
Right, 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 right.
then they don't take any action
Hmm.
and instead they just have anxiety and worry over it.
And they
So
just miss the train. Yes, yes,
they
yes.
do. Yeah.
Right, 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 right. It's kind of that, yeah. And then there's the opposite polarity with Aries that are just way too impulsive at times and can just jump into things, which I, as an Aries moon, have been guilty of doing that. So kind of, yeah, just yeah, find a medium ground maybe with all of this to
Yes.
know. Very good. All right. So next up we have a Libra rising. This is taking place in the 12th house, which
Hmm.
has to do with psychology, the subconscious. Um, Oftentimes things that are self-undoing, essentially, or self-destructive. So it can have to do with things like addictions, or just habits that are just not really constructive habits.
Yeah.
It rules places of solitude, which is not to say that any of this necessarily applies to anyone, but just, solitude. So it could be, worst case scenario, prisons and asylums of some sort, but it could also be monasteries. Or it could just really just locking yourself up in your house for a bit and taking some time to just be with you and just and analyze some things. I mean, it's a good time to release trauma. I think a lot of trauma that's stored in the memory in this. I see the 12th house as very much a reservoir of trauma. So it could be a good
Yeah.
time to kind of sit with that and try to work through that and release it in whatever way you deem appropriate. Maybe working with a psychologist or just a friend, someone that you trust that can hear you and listen to you, or even just writing it, writing it out. Because I feel that, writing is a very powerful tool. Even if no one ever reads it, you don't have to send it to anyone. If you have something to say to someone that maybe they're not even here anymore, maybe someone that died that you didn't get to actually say goodbyes or say the last words that were on your heart, it could be a good time to put that down on paper
Hmm.
to just get it out of your system as a ritual of sorts, just to purge
Hmm.
that from yourself. So yeah, it's a very somber time. I mean, again, Saturn and the Sun were just conjoined. That kind of ties into this a little bit as well. Saturn being exalted in Libra, being the sign opposite to that in the seventh house. So see that for what you will in terms of how it applies to you and other aspects in your current transit chart. Um,
Yeah. For
right.
Libra in particular, because it is the 12th house and because we have the influence of the star that is connected to psychic and prophecy,
Hmm.
for the occultists that are Libras or Libra risings out there, this is a great time for you to really do some past life work or scrying or
Hmm.
rune reading, whatever your jam is in
Hmm.
those activities. It would be a great time. to do that.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. Yeah, take some time for yourself. Take care of you. Get
Yeah.
back in balance. Get back in that harmony space. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I have a Libra sun, so I can loosely read this as applying to myself in that way. To just take some time for quiet, which in reflection, which I do quite often, but now more so just because of the at the actual moment of just being able to appreciate what's actually taking place in the sky. Uh, right. Okay. So next we have Scorpio rising. This is taking place in the 11th house, which has to do with networks. So it can be physical networks of people, or now in our 21st century internet age, networks online. So social media applies into this, and other groups you may belong to online, friends, and then other groups or communities, clubs. Um, so this is kind of a shedding as well process. I see because it's release, right? Maybe you're purging your social life in terms of people that you used to be affiliated with, or certain groups that maybe now you're taking a step back. Scorpio is a very analytical sign as well, and they're very good at strategizing. So maybe this is a good time to take a step back and strategize how you want to go about your social life, what people are worth still keeping around, where it's worth investing your time and energy, or even just in terms of networks, which networks altogether you just need to let go of and just not worry about, or social media the same. Maybe just it's just not really a constructive, sorry, thing to get involved in. So maybe you even take a break from social media for a time, perhaps. I'm just throwing out
Yeah.
possibilities here. Um, yeah, and just focus in. Scorpio is a sign that's very much linked with the occult and with the deep psychological components of self. So it's a good time for that to be applied into how you're even interacting with society at large. Really, preparing yourself maybe for the events that are to come. Like how are you gonna respond to any crises perhaps that come about? So in terms of strategizing, maybe kind of looking and foreseeing things that need preparation. We were talking about food supply shortage, perhaps, maybe figuring out, how you're going to be managing that, you know, water backup supply, food supply, maybe in this case. That could apply to everyone really, but I'm just looking at Scorpio in terms of maybe looking at the collective in this way and how to engage in it. That's one way maybe to look at preparing oneself, just something to keep in mind. But
Yeah.
that could definitely apply to anyone, regardless of where this is happening in your chart. Just prepare because the global significations of this are going to affect everyone on some level, some more than
Yeah.
others. But either way, just be prepared, right? Um,
For
again,
for the 11th house, the
mhm,
11th house is also connected to the rewards of your 10th, the rewards of your efforts in the 10th house.
from the 10th house, yeah, move to the 11th, right? Okay, right.
So for some Scorpios, they've been working their ass off for ages now. And I
Hmm.
think, because I know someone in my life who's a double Scorpio and has been doing that,
Hmm.
this lunar eclipse is going to symbolize this coming to fruition because Virgo and Scorpio actually get along as well.
Hmm.
So
Yes, right.
there can be a fruition. The lunar eclipse is like the birth of something. The pregnancy is swelling so much that the
Yeah.
baby's about to pop out.
Yeah.
So that
Right,
can
right.
be for Scorpios. There can be great rewards connected to this eclipse.
Yeah, I can see that. That's very good. Yeah, the sextile there. Sextiles are ruled by Venus as well, or the
Yeah.
nature of Venus, so it's benefic. It's a very benefic aspect. Um, yeah, that's good. That's all I had for that. For Scorpios, but those are all points to consider there, and of course take this always and apply it to your own natal chart and other factors that may apply here.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on to Sagittarius now. This is happening in the 10th house, which is the house of public life, so your reputation. The career, of course, is under this, what you're known for, what your work is. Um, and so basically, this has to do with some shift taking place in the career or the work life. So it could mean you're actually leaving your job. Maybe you've been considering this for a time, or maybe this will be the point that catalyzes this transition, this shift. Not necessarily change your career entirely. You could maybe just decide to take your career and just go solar or venture with someone else. All this, of course, will depend on what your work actually is. But if it's to leave a company of some sort, um, or just decide maybe altogether you're just not interested in that vocation anymore, or that you want to pursue a vocation, so you're leaving a career that you've been doing. So this could actually mean shedding of something that didn't have as much meaning or purpose in your life to undertake new work that does. I mean, Sagittarius is a very mission-oriented sign. I associate it kind of as the archetype of the missionary, someone with a cause that wants to spread specific positive news, um, messages. So it could also have to do with writing and publishing, things of that nature. Not to say everyone's a writer, but if you have something to say, you have in this 10th house space, which is a very visible space, you have sort of a platform there that you can develop that stage to then announce your message, whatever that may be, through a different kind of work, or just taking a step back to reanalyze what you want for work. Is there anything you want to add to this for Sagittarius risings?
Yeah, the 10th house is also about your marital status. And Jupiter
Okay.
right now for Sag rising is in the 7th house. It could be an engagement or even a marriage, or it could also be the opposite, a breakup perhaps that unfolds because your
Mm.
status is changing, including your marital status with the 10th house.
Okay, right. The angular houses, the seventh and tenth, right? So
Yeah.
that's square, right? And well, right. Venus is retrograde, so that's another thing to always keep in mind for just the whole scope of horoscopes here. That relationships come to an end, regardless of what house it's in. That's kind of a general signification, or at least being revised on some level.
Revise, yeah. I mean, that can
Yeah.
be a good thing. Hey, I love this
Hmm.
person. I really want to marry them. So let's
Hmm.
plan that for after all of this,
Yeah.
retrogrades are over.
A status shift, for better or for worse. So a status shift from being
Yes.
single to then being married to a person, from just dating or being engaged to actually taking the step to commit fully.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And of course, that's a very public event, or well, usually is a public event. I mean, it could be secret, but I mean, all depends on what's going on. But yeah, that's a good thing to know. I hadn't thought about that. Um, so yeah, I guess that's all I had. I didn't want to spend too much time on any particular sign. So let's see.
Mm-hmm.
Next, we have Capricorn rising. This is taking place in the ninth house uh, of philosophy. So your own personal philosophy, which then by default is your beliefs, has to do with education, usually higher education. Though it could also be independent education, not necessarily anything having to do with academia or university, but you deciding you want to educate yourself. So just taking a course, maybe online, or just beginning to read and study for yourself on a specific subject. Long distance travel is indicated by the ninth house as well. Um, Also foreign things, so traveling to foreign places, or else just encountering foreigners or things that are foreign to you in some way. Um, however that may be, that's a multitude of ways that could manifest. But yeah, so that's what I have for the ninth house, being ruled by Saturn, which just conjoined the sun too. So being the ruler of the ninth house, just had this fire ritual, this purification, and also Saturn's about to change signs. So it's possible that the effects of this won't actually be felt till Saturn is in Aries, right? And then trining this house.
Mm-hmm.
Um, or well, well, not trining the house. I'm sorry, not trining. I got confused there for a second. But yeah, just Saturn and Aries, maybe, or even won't. Sorry, not Neptune is moving in first. Saturn won't actually be moving until later in March, but it's still coming up. So because this is a 6 month or so effect, oftentimes you may not feel it immediately. So it's not like just tomorrow or in the next couple of days.
Yeah,
You may not feel anything or maybe not see anything, but the story plot is kind of developing. So
it does.
for,
It
for
it
Capricorn risings.
unfolds. Yeah.
Hmm. Right, especially because things like journeys, long distance journeys can take time to plan. So maybe this is where you begin to plan. And Mercury retrograde maybe is kind of the beginning of also reconsidering all the details you have to take into consideration before you make a big trip, like especially a long trip overseas. Getting a passport, looking at maybe visas, or any of these requirements that you have to take into account before going on a long trip like that. All of that stuff. So if that were the case with Capricorn risings, or just even revising your beliefs and your life philosophy, it's not necessarily like a light bulb moment. It could just mean you begin to maybe become skeptical about something you've believed your whole life, and new information comes in, especially through Mercury retrograde, helping you to reconsider something, so that by the end of the process, you'll just through a very organic, um, internal process, you'll come to new conclusions about what you believe about your own philosophies, or yeah, or just in general, just um, yeah, life philosophy, right?
Yeah, it's a good it that this person might also find a spiritual teacher,
Hmm.
a guru, which is a ninth house thing. Maybe they
Yeah.
want to learn something. Maybe they're at a university and they absolutely hate it. And they're like, you know what, I don't want to do this. I'm going to
Hmm.
go and study astrology instead.
Right,
So
right, yeah.
maybe it unfolds to something like that.
It is about release. So yes, it is. I think there probably is a shift in terms of that, in terms of education, what you're studying, what you're focusing on, yeah, where your attention is going in that case, and hence your beliefs too. Because I mean, you shift some things in your studies, it's likely to shift your beliefs about these. As new information comes in, it's going to affect on some level, or at least have some input, something to say about it.
Hmm.
Um, and Capricorn can be pretty objective. I feel so that they're not. They just like to see construct, structures. They like to know. I feel it's a pretty rational sign for the most part.
Yeah.
They just have to see the proof, the evidence, because they're skeptical until proven otherwise. And so, if the proof is there, they think they're more readily to take that into account. Um, what was I going to say? Yeah, I think that's good. That's good for Capricorn rising. So that's the ninth house. So let's move on to Aquarius now. This is taking place in the eighth house. Kind of a challenging house, but not necessarily. It has to do with taxes, debt, but also maybe inheritance, because it is inherently it has to do with other people's money.
Hmm.
So that could mean taxes or money that's owed to you, or in this case, also just an inheritance from maybe a death in the family or something that's kind of the positive silver lining, that you inherit some wealth through that. Um, and, or maybe it's letting go of debts, finally paying something off and being released from that, having that karma finally just go away because you're able to have finally paid it off and work through it. It's also the house of life force. This is something, maybe it's more of a Vedic. I learned that signification through Victor Kara, which I very much value his interpretations of the houses, because it is the house in the natural zodiac ruled by Scorpio. So it has,
Yeah.
life force, sexuality, which is more than just sex itself. It's your actual life force. It's also the house of death, but really it's
Yeah.
kind of anti-death. It's kind of what's keeping you from dying. It's that, primal life force essence. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Because
it's
it can be, at times if you look at charts of people that have died,
hmm
the eighth house is always going to be involved. But for most people, when we have eighth house transits, of course, it's a rebirth of sorts.
hmm
And for Aquarius with the eighth house, it can symbolize, a deep, because Ketu is there, there's a deep transformative process.
hmm
And the financial houses are really lighting up for Aquarius here because they've got Rahu and Saturn and, in the second house.
right.
So a better
Yeah.
relationship with money.
Yeah, and ending to something that was depleting you of energy, of life force energy. Maybe now that's coming to a halt, and something new. Granted, there's no other transits aside from this that are happening too. So this is we're just honing in and focusing on one particular transit, but for an individual and their life, there's lots of other things that are going on. That this is just one piece of it. That I would recommend just getting a reading with either Fiona or myself to really look into your actual template and the things that are coming about in your life potentially in the next couple months, if you really want to put this in full context. Um, but yeah, I don't see that as a negative thing necessarily. Just it's very nuanced, but it does have to do with other people, involvement with other people's resources. So whether that's something that benefits you or not, we'll have to see. Um, it has to do with hidden things as well. So maybe it's the release. So maybe it's a sort of revelation here that also kind of comes to bear here. Things that weren't seen before that then become apparent, because the
Yeah.
Sun Saturn conjunction kind of has to do with that, with the sun illuminating something that was hidden, even if
Hmm.
it's not taking place in this particular house, because there's a an eclipse taking place there. Also, it's the idea of something becoming darkened and then re-illumined. So there's that moment of going from ignorance, or from something that was out of your view, out of your perception, becoming something, gaining perception of it. So it's kind of it's probably something internal, because I see the Scorpio or the eighth house as a very much an internal process that certainly can manifest on the outside, because that's within as without. But something you're going to definitely um, be working through internally, I'd say more so.
Yeah.
Uh, right. All right. Well, now the final sign we have is Pisces, right? Which is taking
Mm-hmm.
place in the seventh house. This is another very potent one, kind of like Virgo, because it's happening opposite to the lunar eclipse. So this is the house of partnerships, as you said before, which can mean marriage partnerships, but then also just business partnerships or just any other one-to-one relationship you have aside from marriage. I mentioned before legal matters, so could have to do with courts and actual lawsuits maybe that are taking place. Maybe that's coming to an end on some level. However, that could tie into your story.
Yeah.
Or just maybe having less energy available for other people. Maybe it's just a time when you just have to release that and just really focus on yourself because you've been giving away a lot of your time and energy to other people and other things. Even your partner, maybe they'll have to understand that you need some time to yourself. Maybe they've been a bit needy, or maybe they were just maybe something happened that they needed more of your attention. Maybe they were ill and now they've gotten better, or that situation's just been resolved so that your time isn't as drained and you're able to just take more time for yourself, perhaps, Pisces. Um, that's something I can see there happening.
Yeah. A relationship cycle is coming to an end with this eclipse, whatever that may be. It doesn't mean that it's a breakup. It
Hmm.
can be like we talked about before, just the start of something new, the end of a previous scenario. But Pisces have been really challenged lately.
Hmm.
I feel kind of bad for them. They've got Saturn there, they've
And
got
Neptune.
Rahu there, they've got Neptune,
That's
which
about to lighten up. I feel that for
oh
most people that maybe already experienced Neptune in Pisces, because it's been there since 2011, so for a lot of people, it could feel like their whole life, or a good chunk of their life at least. So
yeah,
that the relief of Neptune coming out, there'll be a different, maybe more clarity, because I mean,
yeah.
I don't know. Pisces is kind of that territory that isn't exactly a clear territory, but perhaps they'll just they'll experience more of a lightness, maybe, or and
I
especially
think
after Saturn
so.
leaves as well.
Yeah.
Kind of similar to Capricorns once Pluto moved out, and after that almost 20-year transit,
Oh.
feeling that relief there.
Yeah,
We'll see.
I think everyone will, not just Pisces. I mean, I've got a
Sure,
Gemini ascendant and Mercury and Mars,
of
and
course.
Neptune has been squaring that stellium for
All the
ages
mutable
now.
signs will
I'm
feel it.
so tired of it. I'm really
Mm.
tired of it. I can't wait for Neptune to move into Aries.
Yeah, well, there's still one final lesson that can't jump the gun with this one yet.
No,
That's just
stop
the
it.
thing.
For, for me, it's like having like subtle addictions to things like foods.
Hmm.
Stop eating these things that are bad for you. But it's like this Neptunian, the
Hmm.
cake becomes the siren in the
Ah,
ocean.
sure, yeah, no, serious business. Yeah, yeah, I see that. It's different for everyone, but yeah, everybody can probably relate to that on some level. Yeah, for me, it's in my eighth house, so
Oh.
um, it's kind of kind of things that maybe I don't see as much is because it's got it rules hidden things as much as the 12th house as well. So, there's definitely a correlation, well, between the 12th and 8th, particularly in my chart because of the ruler, because Jupiter rules my eighth house, and I have Jupiter in the 12th using whole
Mm.
sign. Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, a lot to get in there, but I'm not trying to get into my chart right now. But yeah, definitely, it's something to anticipate. That Neptune shift. Happening pretty much after the eclipse here at the end of the month. That'll be the solar eclipse in Aries is still coming up. So they're both
Mm.
tied together. So again, this is just the beginning. It's the first kind of preliminary big event, I guess you could say, of March. That it's not by any means the end of the story because I mean this is all going to carry into April as well.
Mm-hmm.
But at least now we're going to see kind of the beginnings of the turning points. You could kind of say like this is really like the beginning of the end. And you could people have been saying that maybe forever on a lot of things, but I really think that this particular event is really the beginning of the end. It's a beginning and ending simultaneously, right? So, but
Yeah.
it's really shaping and toning the rest of the year because March is really that month that's really setting the tone for the rest of 2025.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
for better or for worse. And again, we've stated this before. I've heard you say so, and I say it as well. Just because the world outside is a mess, and it's all chaotic. I mean, don't pay too much attention to that. I mean, look at it, of course, be informed. Follow it to mostly just to maybe see the astrology involved here to kind of gauge what what's really going on a little bit better. but focus on your own life. I mean, you can create a wonderful life for yourself. I'm certainly am beginning to do that here. I'm seeing a lot of wonderful opportunities coming in spite of what may have seemed like really dire circumstances previously. I mean, even looking back a year ago, it's tremendously changed now in only about a year. So I think anyone could, if they have in mind, what they want, and actually just,
Yeah.
write it, visualize it, put it out there into the universe, and then just act on it. I mean, don't hyper focus on it too much because, as they say, lust for results is kind of what blocks that from actually manifesting. So set your intention, put it out there, release it, and then just take small steps toward that goal, whatever that may be, to bring into your life the things that you desire. And don't worry about what's happening out there in the world. Sure, there may be some things that we need to be prepared for in order to be able to navigate this reality, but it's not something that it has as much control over you as you may think. That's kind of the illusory uh, component. I think is also very Neptunian, that there's more power over you than I think it's more power that we give it than it actually takes from us. It aren't able to extract it from us as we're able to focus on that. So a lot of our thoughts aren't even our own. They may actually be parasites that are just infesting our mind, and these thoughts are being implanted there, and they're not actually ours. So we can release them, maybe even ritualistically. Use whatever method you find that's good. I mean, Fiona and I both like using the runes a lot for ritual, for protection, like using algaes and turisas particularly, because psychological warfare is a very real thing. And I see Neptune very much tied into that. And with Neptune moving into Aries, it's going to be targeted more on the individual.
Hmm.
So it's kind of a double-edged sword, Neptune and Aries, the way I'm seeing it. It's going to be hyping up warfare to dissolve the individual via AI and the implants that have already been put in to many people. And then also the other side of it is people coming into their own spiritual path, actually seeing that for themselves they can take up the baton, and like pioneers carving their own path, and actually, getting away from organized religion, getting away from cults, getting
Hmm.
away from any of these gurus that are just there as energy vampires that are just having people, worship at their feet, which are no different than the priest class. They're just, it's hopefully, it's because there's two timelines. It's going to definitely, there's two different types of people: the people that are going to get sucked into it all the more and lose themselves in the collective blob of nothing, and the people that are going to be sovereign and take up the true Aryan spirit of becoming individuals, find the I am within thyself, know thyself all the more. Especially now with all the Aries energy that's getting ramped up, it's an opportunity we're being given before whatever is about to come to pass, to really come into yourself, to really take up the Aries spirit, to
Yeah.
really embody that warrior spirit of what cause do you stand for? What are you willing to fight for? Perhaps even die for. I'm not going to say that that's necessarily something that everyone's going to be asked. It's not something that's required, but it's something maybe one needs to consider. What would you die for if there is anything? I mean, not in a martyr way that you're just going to bend over and be a doormat for whatever. That tends to be the shadow of Pisces. Now we're kind of coming out of
Hmm.
that, the darker side of Pisces. I'm not by any means smearing Pisces. I'm saying that's the shadow side of Pisces with Neptune there. Now it's going
Yeah.
into Aries. So maybe we can look at the more positive Aryan qualities, hopefully surfacing, and people taking that energy and running with it, and using it for a very positive cause. That ultimately, if enough people do it, we can maybe see some kind of shifts on the collective, even not just internally in your own life or with those around you. So I don't know. Do you have any thoughts to add to that?
I think people have become extremely passive
Mm-hmm.
during the Neptune and Pisces transits, and I think that a lot of people have really had enough about
Mm-hmm.
so many different issues, and we are going to see perhaps people more willing to, fight properly for certain things,
I agree.
which isn't a bad thing, because what's there's no point in like sitting on your ass and complaining on the internet about things.
No. Well, yeah,
And
it's probably a good time.
Pisces is, the negative side of Pisces is a real victim. And that victimhood has been glorified since 2011. And it's kind of sickening. So
Yeah,
I think we're seeing an end to
but it's
that.
dying.
Yeah,
That's going away. The woke is dead. That
it
virus
is.
that came through, it's done. They have no power. I mean, I saw, I have experienced that the pendulum swing. I mean, I think everybody, I say I saw, and I know many people have seen it as well. but it's there. It's there apparent for anyone with eyes to see that there's been a swing of the pendulum, a changing of the baton now, which is all the more so going to be concretized because Neptune, dissolves things as well. So almost like at these last energetic degrees, Neptune's dissolving the very thing it kind of created or essentially
Hmm.
signified a creation of. It's not that the planets take sides. Neptune, yeah, sure, it's got the malefic side to it that's kind of what facilitated all this illusory, very creative dissolving, even the gender binary and all of these things that had no reason, no rationality to them. Essentially, it was like an end of reason. But now it's, as it's approaching the end and transitioning and going into Aries, which is a much more objective and practical sign. We're hopefully seeing, and Neptune represents the collective. So hopefully we're going to see the expressions of that. This is an indicator, Neptune and Aries, of a more practical, pragmatic, even way that the collective is going to organize itself now, and then Saturn joining Neptune and Aries shortly as well, will I think further solidify that. And then this just kind of goes back and you have to look at the past. So there's echoes of the past of the last time that Neptune and Aries were together, which is the late 80s. Their conjunction in 1989, which I was actually born under, basically
Hmm.
one degree apart. So for those of you who were also born at that time, late 80s, early 90s, I think this is a kind of a return for us because it's essentially, it's one full cycle from the last conjunction in a different sign now. It's in the cardinal sign, so there's a square to that natal aspect there. I'm getting my Saturn square now, and then also Neptune. So how it's going to affect different generations is always it's a whole other topic, and it's interesting to look at. Depending where your Saturn and Neptune is as well, because they're such slow transits. I think there's going to be even more of a generational gap that's going to be more evident here between, let's say the boomers and the Gen X and the millennials and even, the 21st century people, people born after the 2000 that, still, this is still very new to them. So they don't really necessarily know the world previous to this. So, well, it's always just, it's a different experience for everyone, of course. So there's no way to really generalize, just kind of can only kind of tease out general things that maybe people can relate to on a collective level. But, certainly individually, take this and see how it fits for your personal chart. Um, So yeah, any final thoughts? As maybe we wrap this up here.
Yeah, I think we've covered everything.
Okay, yeah, no, I think we did a good job.
Yes,
Thank
we
you,
did.
thank you for joining me. I think this has been a sufficiently in-depth analysis of all 12 signs and this the general astrology. Everyone out there, be cautious. Just take some time. Uh, just maybe just stay home if you're able to, and just tomorrow, as it approaches. I mean, it'll be a different time for everyone, so maybe look at exactly at what time it's going to be taking place exactly. So maybe at that particular time, not necessarily all day, but maybe just keep a low profile. Um, yeah, I mean, some suggest fasting if you're able to do that, or at least try to eat lightly. And drinking water too. Just taking care of yourself because it is Virgo. Virgo's all about self-care and nutrition and things like that. So wherever this falls in your chart, just either way, take that into consideration. And yeah, I wish everyone the best. And we will see you next time on the next episode. Don't forget to check out Fiona's Substack. She puts out both new moon and full moon horoscopes as much as other articles that are also very interesting. Also check out my Substack for previous episodes I've put out. I've been doing a series with Michael Suter on the Decans, which another one. The second part's about to come out here shortly, as soon as that's recorded. Um, and yeah, just thank you for tuning in to Wheel of Ezekiel Astrology Podcast. As above, so below, as within, as without.